Hey Chemistry, Mrs. KJ here going over 7.06 Proteins and Nucleic Acids. Proteins and nucleic acids are two important classes of biochemicals. You have probably heard the biotechnologists can engineer organisms to create new proteins that could be used to cure diseases. Perhaps you have heard of the Human Genome Project to sequence the library of human genes in the hopes of someday curing genetic diseases. Biotechnology basics involve two classes of organic molecules, proteins and nucleic acids. In this lesson, you will learn about the structures and functions of these molecules. Goals for this lesson: explain the importance of amino acids, describe the relationship of amino acids and proteins, illustrate a peptide bond, describe a DNA polymer made of nucleotides, describe DNA as a collection of nucleotides or nucleic acids. Organic molecules, an example could be amino acids, form proteins through peptide bonds. Another example is nucleotides form nucleic acids, which can form amino acids. So the student guide is on slide 2, and I just kept that first paragraph in our goals and our keywords, amino acids. The organic molecules that serve as the units from which proteins are made. Nucleotide, a subunit of a nucleic acid that consists of a phosphate group, a 5-carbon sugar, and a nitrogenous base. Peptide bond, a bond that forms between amino acids by a condensation reaction. Hopefully you remember that a condensation reaction releases what? Water. And proteins, one of the 4 major classes of large organic molecules made of amino acids. Proteins have many functions. Besides carbohydrates and fats, proteins are another important class of biological molecules. Proteins are everywhere and have many functions. First function is structure. Proteins make up many parts of your cells in your body, such as hair, bones, and muscle. Proteins can be enzymes. These proteins are biological catalysts that speed up chemical reactions within the cell. And of course, because they're catalysts, that means they are not used up. Proteins can transport. Proteins like hemoglobin in your blood transport the gases carbon dioxide and oxygen. Toxins. Toxins and venoms are proteins, so like snake venom. Messages. Many hormones in your body are proteins that transmit signals from one cell to another. So hair is made of protein that provide protection and sensation to an organism. Protein is important in the structure of the body. Muscles are primarily composed of protein. Snake venom is a protein that is hazardous to other living organisms. So that's the fang there with the venom. It's kind of a cool picture. And so I added down the 5 main protein functions and just kind of shortened them up what they were. Proteins are polymers of amino acids. Okay, so remember, what's a polymer? Poly means many. So if you put a bunch of monomers together, you get a polymer. Well, a protein is a polymer, and the amino acids are the building blocks or the monomers. Amino acids are the monomers used in building proteins. You might say they are the building blocks of proteins. On this food label, you see that the item contains 2 grams of protein per serving. The proteins in the servings are digested in the body. There are 20 different amino acids, and most proteins contain many of them. All right, so I just kind of threw this in here to say that, oh yeah, look at this. But really, the big idea here is that there's 20 amino acids. Proteins contain many of them, and there's only 20 building blocks to make up all these different functions here. It's pretty incredible what they can do. So I just decided to add there are 20 amino acids up here under amino acids, and I added the fact that they are monomers. Amino acids have amino and carboxyl groups. So remember we talked about functional groups that you add on to the end of your carbon chain. So here's our carbon chain. We have an amino group and we have a carboxyl group. Consider a simple amino acid like alanine. It has a central carbon surrounded by 4 groups. Okay, so here's the central carbon. It has a hydrogen. It has the amino group, which is NH2. So N with 2 hydrogens. It has carboxylic acid or a carboxyl group, which is carbon double bonded to an oxygen, single bonded to another oxygen, which is attached to a hydrogen. And that's why it's COOH instead of CO2H. They write it like this purposely because of that double bond and saying, okay, the double bond's there, and then the hydrogen is attached to the other oxygen. It also has a methyl group, which is CH3. All amino acids have the first three groups, okay? So all amino acids have this. The amino group gives the amino acid basic properties, while the carboxyl group gives it acidic properties. Okay, so it's kind of like it's part base, part acid. These two groups on adjacent amino acids will interact chemically. So this base will hook onto the acid part of the next amino group. So picture this repeating, and so the blue hooks onto the black and red, hooks onto the blue, it's a pattern. The fourth group differs among the 20 naturally occurring amino acids. This variable fourth group is designated R, or like remainder, and that's important. That in this case is the methyl group, and that R is going to tell us more about the amino acid. So R groups determine the classification of amino acids. The various amino acids differ in the R group. For example, glycine is the simplest amino acid, where R is just a hydrogen atom. The R of alanine, however, is a methyl group, or that's CH3. And the R of phenylalanine is a benzene ring. The amino acids can be classified into 5 groups based on their properties. Okay, so they can be nonpolar. The R's are mostly alkyl groups, like alanine, valine, and leucine. They can be polar, where the R's are OH and C double bonded O, but not charged, like serine, glutamine, proline. They can be aromatic, where the R's are rings, like phenylalanine and tyrosine. They can be positively charged or basic, so the R are amino groups, like lysine or arginine. And they can be negatively charged or acidic, where the R's are carboxyl groups, like aspartic acid or glutamic acid. And sorry about my pronunciation. I've never been good at pronouncing things, so bear with me. All right. So, amino acids. Okay, so this just shows you how there's 5 different groups of them, and then you can see them here. So you can see the nonpolar amino acids, they basically have what for their chains? They basically have carbons. If we look at the polar group, now you can see that C double bonded O on some of them. You can see the OH. If you look at the aromatics, now remember aromatic, they're going to have that ring of carbon that has double bonds and single bonds in it, including tryptophan, which is that stuff in turkey that makes you tired. You could have the positively charged group, which makes it basic properties. So you can see the plus right there on that one. Or, of course, the opposite would be negatively charged. The opposite of a base is an acid. And then you have the COO with the -1 charge. So I added to our notes the 20 amino acids are made of hydrogen, an amino group, which is NH2, and that's the basic properties. They're made of a carboxylic acid or carboxyl group, COOH, which has acidic properties, and it's made of an R group. This part is different for each amino acid. It's like the functional group. So the types that you can have are nonpolar, polar, aromatic, positively charged or basic, negatively charged or acidic. Peptide bonds link amino acids. Okay, so remember how I was talking about how you have the blue and the red end, or more specifically, as it mentioned here, it has the amino group, which is the nitrogen, and the amino group is the basic part or alkaline, and then it has the carboxyl group, or the red end, and that part is the acidic part. Okay, so look how here when I have 2 together, now you're really going to see the pattern of the blue, red, blue, red when they hook together, or in other words, opposites attract, right? The basic end of one is going to be attracted to the acidic end of the other. Amino acids can react with each other and form bonds called peptide bonds. Here's how it works. The OH portion of the COOH on one amino acid interacts with the NH2 group on the adjacent amino acid. The OH from the COOH group gets removed, and so does one H from the NH2 group. And then, of course, the H and the OH form water. Okay, so you know that. So in other words, this part's going to come off with one of these, and boom, we made water. And what kind of reaction is that? A condensation. The nitrogen of the NH2 group binds with the carbon of the COOH group to form a peptide bond. The new molecule, a dipeptide, has a free NH2 end and a free COOH end to react with other amino acids. The dipeptide, or two peptides, can form more peptide bonds and grow. Voila! All right, so let's watch it again. Before I do, notice how they have R down here? So that R, remember, stands for one of the groups that are attached. So one of the functional groups, so it could be this, it could be that, it could just be a hydrogen, all depending on what amino acid it is. Okay, so they're coming together, and it's going to take off that water, so the hydrogen from over here, the OH from the red end, and then they're going to come together. When they come together, now the carbon is attached to the nitrogen. That bond in between them is called a peptide bond, and again, water popped off onto the side. So amino acids bond by peptide bonds. So I just did a three-part picture, showed before. In the middle, they come together, and you can see that the oxygen and hydrogen are coming off of the end of one amino acid, while another hydrogen is coming off the end of the other amino acid, and then, of course, the end result. So I said the OH from one amino acid pops off and combines with the H from the NH2 end of the next amino acid and makes water. Then I said the carbon and nitrogens bond to make a peptide bond and a new molecule called a dipeptide. This can repeat to form longer chains or polypeptides, many peptide bonds. So let's read about polypeptides. Amino acids form long polypeptide chains. Amino acids link together by peptide bonds to form long polymers called polypeptides. Think of a polypeptide as a chain where each link may be a different amino acid. Polypeptide chains can be hundreds or thousands of amino acids long. Because there are 20 amino acids, the variation in polypeptides is enormous. It's like math class. Okay, if I had 3 blue blocks and 3 red blocks, you can make so many different patterns, right? Well, now think if I have 20 different blocks, each a different color, think of all the patterns you can make. Once the polypeptide chain is finished, it will not remain as a long, straight chain. Hydrogen bonds will form between nearby amino acids to form a coil or accordion-shaped sheet. It will also fold over on itself through various types of bonds and interactions. The sequence of amino acids determines these shapes, and the shapes are important for the function of the protein. A protein is a molecule made up of one or more polypeptide chains that has a specific function in a living thing. The shape is important because remember we talked about when you have collision theory, so the chemicals need to combine and hit each other in order to react. Well, they also need to fit into each other like a lock and key. And so shape is crazy important when we talk about proteins. So primary protein structure. You know what? Let's pick this up in the next video because I'm about to run out of time.